As mentioned earlier, we recently added that fifth pillar to our work. And we're going to ask Nadia to really respond to the quote from Dr. King, but really speak to this question of diversity, this question of inclusion, this question of equity. So, Nadia.
Well, good morning, and thank you so much. I feel like my back is to folks, so I'm going to scoot over. Good morning to you, and thank you so much to the Urban League for inviting me to participate. It is very early, and I think in the morning. I don't talk in the morning. Ask anybody in my family. Especially and congratulations on busting at the seams. But thank you for the invitation to commemorate such a great and honorable ancestor of ours, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Oftentimes we forget that he was a reverend first. And that has to do with the quote that I was given. And so I'm going to read it for those of you who might be challenged, like Joe is. There is nothing more dangerous than to build a society with a large segment of the people in that society who feel they have no stake in it, who feel they have nothing to lose. People who have no stake in their society, people who have a stake in their society, they protect it. But when they don't, they unconsciously want to destroy it. This quote, I am a systems thinker, so I have to understand context and why he would say such a thing and what was going on. This was a quote that he gave during the Ware lectureship in 1966 to a group of Bostonians, and I'm sure other folks nationally. The title of the speech was "Don't Sleep Through the Revolution." He was specifically speaking to churches where he was challenging them to be true to the nature of what a church is. That's a topic for a whole nother discussion, but I'm gonna leave you with the 4 points that he gave to churches because it's pertinent to the conversation. He challenged churches to be true to their nature, to stand as the moral guardian of the community and society, to broaden their horizons. He challenged the church to challenge the status quo, and even to question and break mores when it was necessary to do so, in those mores that kept us stagnant. He challenged the church to be divinely discontent, right, with the state of the world. And he said you have to do 4 things to stay woke. Now, those of you who are connected to Black Twitter, you understand that that's a handle on Black Twitter, stay woke. Dr. King was before his time for many things, and that is one of them. He foresaw staying woke. He called on the church to instill a worldview in their congregations. He understood globalization and said, okay, look, we've made the world a neighborhood, now we have to make it a brotherhood, right? He called the church to refute the idea of superior and inferior races. He called the notion of white supremacy strange, which is kind of strange as a Black person, as an African American. I think it's strange that some people think they're better than me, right? So I was vibing with Dr. King on that. He also challenged the church to affirm over and over again the essentially immorality of racial segregation. Not because being in the presence of whiteness somehow drips off of us and then we get some of your privilege, but with you comes resource and privilege, and that's what we're trying to tap into, not so that we can rub up against you, right? Although we do need to be rubbing up against each other. And 4, which is my favorite, he challenged the church to move out into areas of social action, including strong social action programs and the support of strong, meaningful civil rights legislation. He cautioned the church and society from exaggerating the progress we've made, so he's a realist. All in the power of love is how he kept it. So specifically dealing with the quote, of course, we're in dangerous times, right? Because we have built a society purposefully. It's in our DNA. We started with genocide. We went ahead to colonialism and slavery. This was part of how our country, and that's a reality that is painful, but one that we have to sit with if we really want to create transformational solutions, right? So these people have nothing to lose, right? If Dr. King talks about a series of conditions at which we ought to be permanently maladaptive to, conditions of poverty and social isolation and lack of education and a mass incarceration system, to believe that poverty, particularly generational poverty, right? Folks who have, since their ancestors came to these shores, have lived below the ability to create access to their means, right? Those folks who have never known anything but poverty, like I'm the first generation who hasn't known poverty. That's insane, right? To believe that poverty, racial equity, social isolation, poor education lead to anything but violence is asking the victims of oppression to adjust, to contort our bodies, our minds, our spirits, as Dr. Zuberi would say, to such conditions, to bend our hearts and minds to accept this strange notion of white supremacy. Is that the ask? Is the ask for us to accept that more Black bodies are under state supervision in the mass incarceration system than Africans that were enslaved during that period in our country? Should we nod to the killing of unarmed Black men and women, dying in custody, and lack of charges and acquittals for those responsible for their murders? Black children, including our girls, should we be okay with them being manhandled in schools by school resource officers? Is the ask for us to accept infant mortality at rates 5 to 8 times those of white women simply because I'm Black? I can't carry my child to term? Should we accept that? Is the ask for Native American brothers and sisters from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe to allow their sacred lands to be destroyed, dig up the bodies of their ancestors, ignore the treaties that we've made with them hundreds of years ago, and ask them to risk drinking oil-infused water, cucumber-infused water, but oil-infused water? Is the ask for the people of Flint to drink bottled water for the rest of their lives? Is our charity response of taking bottled water to them, is that enough? Should not those who are responsible be punished? Don't they owe? Should we ignore the fear that our Latino brothers and sisters carry around with them as they go to school, wondering if their parents are going to be there when they return? Should we expect them to learn under such conditions? Is the ask that we turn our heads through the brutality and the bullying of Arab Americans with the threat to set them on fire because of what they believe? Is that the ask? And what of our impoverished white brothers and sisters, right, who have also for centuries sold their opportunity at economic prosperity for whiteness? That's a whole nother discussion too about how white people became white by law. We'll talk about that another time. If the ask is for us to acquiesce to such conditions, then we find ourselves in this dangerous place of polarization, economically, socially, politically, and spiritually. And it's not sustainable. The belief in a racial hierarchy of human value fails to take into account this interrelatedness that you talk about, right? Dr. King was a prayer, so he wasn't just saying if you bend your knees, you know, you're gonna be subjected to other folks. He was a prayer, he got on his knees a lot. But what he was saying is stand up for something, right? Be willing to give your life as he was for something. We're in a national, think about it, when drugs were an urban problem, that was by design and purposeful, read the new Jim Crow, it became it was sort of like we're gonna have this war on drugs and we're gonna criminalize these people. And this is the new wave of slavery. It's that loophole in the 13th Amendment if you haven't seen 13th, right? But now that it's made it out, drugs have made it out to the suburbs, it's a public health crisis, right? And we need to have, I see treatment centers like advertising like crazy all over the country, right? We're here to help you. which is what they should be doing. But they also should have done it in the 90s when my community was being ravaged and my family. If we're to survive as a country, and I'm wrapping up, Joe, we have to acknowledge everybody's humanity, not only in words, right? It has to be at work, at home, and at play. It has to be in our narratives, policies, practices, how we distribute our resources that undergirds folks' humanity. Don't tell me you believe in my humanity and I ain't gonna eat tonight. That's problematic. Don't tell me you believe in my humanity, but I can't give my children the resources that they need for health, education, housing, a job. That's about my humanity, right? I am a human being. In order to get there, we must wake up to this system that we live in, as Brother Darrell has already shared. And all the activities that we're engaged in must push us towards affirming each other's humanity. It must push us towards dismantling the system that takes our humanity away from us and that creates systems of support, like I'm gonna support you while you're in this devastated state, instead of changing the system so that people don't have to live in devastation. I'm wrapping up for real. Despite the fact, in most arenas, we have completely watered down the power and practices of Dr. King to like nonviolence, I have a dream, we shall overcome, free at last, thank God Almighty, I'm free at last. And there's nothing wrong with any one of those. But Dr. King was a social, spiritual, moral revolutionary of our country and of our time. And he was a serious threat to the establishment. He moved from being focused on civil rights for a group of people to focusing on the economic rights and what undergirds our country. And that was too much. If he were not a serious threat, we wouldn't even be talking about him. If he were not a serious threat, he wouldn't have been surveyed and definitely wouldn't have been assassinated. He was a serious threat because of what actions he took. So I leave you, and as I was preparing, tried to spend time with him, was convicted myself by his words, by his life, by his sacrifice. And I would like to leave you with this provocation that I believe he would grapple with or force us to grapple with if he were here, if he were looking at today's context of the largest economic gap our country has ever seen, of the richest cabinet in the country's history, a cabinet of billionaires, of the diminishment of the advancements he paid for with his life, civil rights, voting rights, and the most racially polarizing environment we've seen since his day. I believe he would ask us, is this one day enough to commemorate my life and sacrifice? Is what we do on a daily basis a reflection of the work that he was assassinated for? And finally, are we accepting and advancing status quo, or are we awake and advancing revolutionary change? Thank you.
Thank you.